friends. I'm the Reverend Mitra Jafarzadeh, and I am recording today in the Fellowship Hall of St. John's Unitarian Universalist Church. Well, in the building that is St. John's. The church is the community that lives and thrives and takes care of each other and seeks to serve the world beyond these walls. It has always been that way. It's just more noticeable today. Today, I wanted to talk with you about family stories from sacred traditions, but I wanted to start by telling you a little bit about my own story and inviting you to give to our Split the Plate partner this week. See, once upon a time when I was a kid, my family lived in Iran and a revolution happened. Nobody in my family wanted it to happen. We didn't plan on it. We didn't mark it on the calendar. And yet suddenly we found ourselves moving to Lexington, Kentucky, where my parents had already bought a home. I can't tell you how important it was that we had a home and how completely and utterly blessed we were to have so much. But we were still not quite complete. It was my mom, my sister, myself, and our poodle sleeping on a pallet of blankets on the floor just off the kitchen. And we didn't have a refrigerator, we didn't have any furniture, we didn't really have much of anything. But we had a lot of hope, and sure enough, it wasn't that long until my father was able to join us. The money flow improved, and we were able to buy furniture and live really a normal life after that brief experience of being dislocated and feeling really torn apart and really like we didn't know what tomorrow would bring. That is so much part of everyone's life right now, that feeling of being separated from all your plans and not knowing what tomorrow will bring. But it's more so for people who may not be able to pay their rent, and as immigrants may not have the resources that others have. Our Split the Plate partner this week has the power to help make a difference in those people's lives. Because they are our Split the Plate partner, that means that you have the power to help make a difference in those people's lives. So please look at the weekly letter that went out and consider making a donation to Heartfelt Tidbits. The work they do really does matter in so many more ways than just providing shelter. As I said before, our topic today is about family stories and family drama and sacred scripture. When the quarantine happened, many of us were suddenly thrown into the world where we were working at home. If you had young children, the children were schooling at home, suddenly getting a hold of grandparents and having them come help out with the kids maybe wasn't so much of an option. Suddenly everything was topsy-turvy, and the house that you were in was being used for purposes that you had not imagined before. Families, however you define that, families had to find new ways to cope immediately. Now, your family might be mom, dad, and 2.5 kids and a dog. That's great. Your family might be comprised of individuals who are not related in any genetic or legal way. Your family might be you yourself. Your family might be any combination imaginable within the scope of human experience. All families are good families. And your home might be a farm with lots of land, lots of trees, lots of animals. Your home might be a condo or an apartment. It might be a studio apartment. And you have been living in that space eagerly awaiting reopening. Whoever you are, whatever your experiences are, I invite you to think about the wealth of tradition that we have inherited from sacred scriptures. I'm going to talk mostly about old Bible stories, but I could be talking about stories from Hinduism. It's just that Hindu stories require a depth of knowledge, a cultural context that I am not prepared to give right now, but some of you may know the stories. Some of you may be more familiar. and some of you may be curious. If you are, I encourage you to delve into that world. It is one where stories of life and love span multiple lifetimes. It is a world where creation and destruction are sometimes manifest in the lives of the gods like Shiva and Kali, and the stories are rich and beautiful. The thing about those stories is they are written on a grand scale, and you might be tempted to think that anything on that grand scale doesn't have anything to do with your life. But I promise you that these stories that are written down by people who are struggling with questions of meaning, struggling with the big questions of life, these stories are all rooted in human emotion. They're all rooted in what we all know to be true and good, what we all struggle with. They're all rooted in our very human desire to try to figure it out. So I want to open that canon to you and invite you to go read a little, go learn a little. In this culture, there are other stories that are more familiar to us, stories from early on in the Bible, stories like the stories of Abraham. And if you want to talk about stories of family drama, the story of Abraham's family is a great place to start. You can think about stories like the one where Abraham kicks out of his house the mother of his oldest son, and his son. That's Hagar and Ishmael. And maybe he kicked them out because there was strife between the boys. Maybe he kicked them out because there was strife between the mothers. It doesn't really matter. In the story, he packs a little water and a little food, and then basically throws Hagar and Ishmael out of the house. And that is a reality in the story that is inescapable. You can't really soften the edges of that part at all. Eventually, the water and the food run out, and Hagar is left almost in complete and total despair. She doesn't have what she needs to survive. She is in a wilderness, and she is alone except for her son. It's at that point where God appears to Hagar, and she finds the well. She finds water, life-sustaining, life-giving water. It's at that point where a promise is made that not only will she survive, but her family will thrive. Her family will thrive. Now, you may think that this story has nothing to do with you. You may think that this story is a long time ago in a different culture. You may choose to dismiss the story because of the circumstances through which Ishmael is born, because there really is no excusing that part of the story. You could choose to dismiss the story for any number of reasons. You could say, well, that culture is not like our culture, so I have nothing to learn there. Or that's not my faith, so I have nothing to learn there. But maybe some of you are in a position, maybe you are in a position where you are struggling with being separated from family, and you wish very much that you could seek reconciliation. This might be a good time to say, this is a story gifted to me from the generations, and I am going to take it in and choose a different way, because different options are open to me. And maybe you are estranged from your family, but that estrangement has been life-giving. Maybe it was only by setting those good boundaries and walking away that you were fully able to accept the blessings that were meant for you and fully able to live into your own promise of not only surviving, but thriving. Either way, these stories from sacred tradition are there for all of us to be able to wrestle with as we choose. And that's just one story. I could talk to you about stories of Joseph and his siblings and how wrong that went and how he managed to make it better eventually. I could talk to you about Jephthah's daughter, but I won't. I will spare you that. I could talk to you about the questionable parentage of a guy named Jesus. That's out there. Or we could talk about the beautiful and enduring story of Ruth and Naomi, two women who had lost everything, absolutely everything. and having nothing else, having no status, no husbands, no money, no home. Instead of sitting down and choosing to fade away, they chose to travel together. They chose to make a new way. It was a combination of age and wisdom met with youth and vitality, and they became family to each other. And together they charted a way and committed to a love that was neither expected nor legislated, but they did it because they had faith in each other, and they knew that together they could go forward. So there are all these stories and more. And all of them, each and every one, whatever tradition you look to, whatever tradition speaks to you, whatever guides you and holds you, all of those stories are rooted in the very human experience which you too are rooted in. Therefore, all of those stories are accessible to you. They're all open and they're there waiting for you. So if you find yourself in a place where you are joyful, keep rejoicing. Because when you do, you join a chorus of gratitude and happiness that stretches through the myths and stories of old. And if you are seeking a creative way to make family better, know that you might choose to be inspired by traditional text, but that the cultures that bound those characters do not bind you. You have the power to take the very best from those stories and walk away from everything else. Just let it go. And for those of you who find yourself in a time of despair, know that you are not alone. Despair is not the final word. There are people and stories who will walk with you until you are able to return and build and begin again. The promise has always been real. You have always been loved, and the story is yours to continue. So may it be.